council chambers. Ooh, I didn't do that. Step back, everyone. Star Wars is coming. We were just speaking of that. Call to order, roll call. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item C, public comment period, correspondence. At this time, I will recognize those members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by me, persons may address the council first stating their name and address. The council may act on any emergency matters introduced by members of the public. And you will each get 5 minutes, and then you start, I will start the timer. Our first individual this evening is Bill Pankert.
Good evening, William Penker, 600 Sycamore Avenue. I will be making some comments related to the discussion Alderman Tompkins started at the last meeting, and they are from the perspective of a 2nd Street corridor supporter and a council watcher. It's important to note that the 2nd Street corridor project will be a multidimensional project developed in stages to include urban renewal, building repurposing, housing, retail, dining, recreation, and green space. It will be an east-west corridor moving through 4 districts: downtown east, retail core, downtown west, and central neighborhood west. The districts were defined by the city in 2015. This is important because it defines the downtown as more than Central Avenue. It broadens the downtown experience and perspective. Is it time to review the 2015 Downtown Master Plan, as well as the 2021 Downtown Strategic Plan developed for Main Street Marshfield by the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, so there can be collegial and complementary efforts between the city and its development partners in the east-west corridor? In reference to housing, retail, and dining, 3 significant areas for a forward-moving downtown, Vanderwall Associates, the consultants for the 2nd Street project, had focus groups do a ranking activity. On a 0 to 5 scale, the focus groups ranked the importance of housing as 4.69 and retail as 4.31. Dining options were ranked on a 0 to 4 scale. Lunch spots and farm-to-table ventures both ranked at 3.21. Other popular options were casual, 3.14, distillery brew pub, 3.0, ethnic, 2.93, deli, 2.92. Fine dining, noted at a past council meeting as a potential jumpstart for the corridor project, was ranked at 2.69. The Marshfield 2021 Community Survey, conducted by Main Street Marshfield, listed dining preferences, and I quote, in order of increasing frequency mentioned: nicer sit-down, ethnic food, outdoor dining, diner, healthy and local foods, burritos, and ice cream. When you meet with the Economic Development Board and the Community Development Authority, should you also have contact with Main Street Marshfield to determine their ability to obtain grants for 2nd Street projects? The Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions database lists a, and I quote, hometown community development corporation. The registered agent is in Madison, and there is a contact point in Marshfield. Depending upon its defined mission, could this be a source of financial assistance for projects? And last, in regard to agenda items O and P, Since these are related to a proposal brought to your attention on December 12, recall there were no testimonials from local supporters. Do you have them tonight, as well as a market study and specific references to local studies and surveys which support that venture? Should you have these in hand before you put the city's signature on the documents? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Panker. Our second, Becky Hebner-Lou.
Good evening. My name is Becky Hebner-Lou and I reside at 1313 East 26th Street. My comments tonight pertain to the proposed appointment of Randy Gershman to the Police and Fire Commission. For those council members who are new, and for those who are continue to serve the city, do we really want a repeat performance? Mr. Gershman was appointed to the PFC previously and resigned in 2021. While Gershman was president of the PFC, here are a few examples of the lack of oversight and accountability for then Police Chief Rick Gramza. Remember, it was Gershman's role to provide that very oversight and accountability. Multiple policy violations, including a TikTok video with females under the age of 21, all handcuffed, scantily clothed, dancing with Chief Gramza, with him in uniform, on duty, with the Marshfield squad lettering clearly visible asking, "Who's next?" Investigation regarding inappropriate and sexual relationships with high school-aged females while serving as police school liaison officer and detective. Gramza was brought back to work in July of 2020 with high praise and affirmation of continued support from Gershman. The investigation wasn't completed. It wasn't completed until August. Investigation of Rick Gramza for multiple on-duty affairs, including sexual assault of one of his own employees. Sexual affairs on duty, on city time, and in city vehicles. Gershman also contacted a previous police chief in an attempt to discredit a victim. Gramza was allowed to continue to collect a salary of over $1 in doing favors. Doing favors is in no way an appropriate working relationship between a police chief and a president of a police and fire commission. We are at a critical juncture in our community. Our city needs help. We need quality citizens, the best of the best, to run for offices, to be appointed to committees and commissions, and attract and retain employees to fill multiple job openings. It is the mayor's responsibility to seek out the best of the best, and the council's responsibility to approve appropriate appointments without controversy. It's time to make sure our committees and commissions include a diverse group of people with different experiences and relevant areas of expertise. What is the process for posting committee and commission openings? The parameters for seeking candidates must be consistent. Are all needs consistently posted on the city website? Many citizens are not aware of the openings or appointments until they're brought before this council for vote. We need a better system. The city has a communications committee. Could they or should they work on a consistent system to communicate the needs of the citizens, the needs to the citizens of Marshfield? Our public safety sectors are still healing from the terrible happenings of the very recent past, while Gershman was a member of and leading the PFC. We cannot go back. What is the purpose of having Randy Gershman be reappointed to the Police and Fire Commission? I'm not interested in hearing about who said what regarding the support for his appointment. The facts are very well documented. We have all heard the definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results. Please do not reappoint Randy Gershman to the Police and Fire Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lu. And our third, Marissa Steinbeck.
My name is Marissa Steinbach. I reside at 1311 East 20th Street. On tonight's agenda, item S states that the mayor will be announcing her appointment of Randy Gershman to the Police and Fire Commission. Although no action is scheduled to take place until the March 28th meeting, I feel it's necessary to remind the council of what happened less than 2 years ago. On April 5th, 2021, a complaint was filed against Randy Gershman outlining 7 items of misconduct that over 100 Marshfield citizens felt he committed during his time on the Marshfield Police and Fire Commission. It is clear to us that Randy violated the oath that he took upon ascending to the PFC by committing actions that broke city policies and engaged in retaliatory behavior. Although these actions may not rise to the level of criminal, they can definitely be considered unethical. Due to the time limitation during public comments, I will only outline a couple of the issues that should be addressed. First, Randy failed to adhere to the City of Marshfield policy number 3.340, Section 6, Item B, which states in part that no public official or employee shall use or attempt to use his position within the city to secure any advantage, preference, or gain over and above his rightful remuneration and benefits for himself or for a member of his immediate family. After receiving phone records through an open records request, Randy admitted under oath to contacting the acting police chief to have him run the phone numbers through a system available only to law enforcement to see who those numbers belong to. Randy also asked a favor of Sue Carlson in the courts department regarding an OWI case that involved a student of Randy's wife. We also believe that Randy violated open meetings laws as demonstrated by the text messages between Randy, the former police chief, and certain members of this common council. Additionally, as president of the PFC, we feel he failed to provide adequate supervision of the police chief, which includes to, but is not limited to allowing him back to work before a DCI investigation was completed. There are pages and pages of documented evidence showing what kind of unethical behavior Randy was involved in. So I'm asking you this: why go backwards? Why time warp 2 years ago? Why intentionally appoint a member to the PFC who has knowingly and willingly committed such unethical acts? This council has had several potential candidates for the PFC who have areas of expertise in human resources and protective services. And they were not approved by this council because of their perceived connection to the police and/or fire department. You now know that there are documented incidents of inappropriate actions of a person who, while serving on the PFC, who stepped down and now wants back on less than 2 years later. I request that you do not allow history to repeat itself.
Thank you, Mrs. Steinbach. And now Steve Bard.
Thank you. I have a letter that was sent to me earlier today that I've been asked to read, so I will go ahead and do so. This statement is from the Marshfield Professional Police Association regarding the proposed appointment of Randy Gershman to the Police and Fire Commission. These are the views and opinions. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I heard a voice. Apologize. These are the views and opinions of the Marshfield Professional Police Association. Mr. Gershman previously served on the Police and Fire Commission over the tenure of disgraced former police chief Rick Gramza. Mr. Gershman's time on the commission ultimately ended in 2021 when he did not seek reappointment. Throughout his time on the commission, union members feel that Mr. Gershman did not display the high moral and ethical standards that are expected of a police and fire commissioner. Mr. Gershman demonstrated a lack of leadership, lack of knowledge of his duties, and a lack of regard for the best interest of the police and fire departments. He failed to provide proper supervision for the former police chief, which ultimately led to a significant investigation involving improper work activity and sexual relationships, costing the city tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. The current budget deficit our public safety departments are in developed during Mr. Gershman's time as president of the Police and Fire Commission. Multiple candidates for the Police and Fire Commission have been voted down by this council for various reasons. The return of Mr. Gershman to the Police and Fire Commission would be detrimental to the morale of the police department. The police union respectfully asked Mayor T. Strake and the members of this council to consider a candidate who did not serve on the commission during the unethical tenure of Rick Gramza. The members of our department deserve to move on and move forward so we can focus on our continued efforts to provide effective law enforcement services for our community. We appreciate the community's continued support and the council's thoughtful consideration on this important appointment as we continue moving forward. And this has been respectfully submitted on behalf of the Marshfield Professional Police Association by the Wage and Grievance Committee, and it's signed by Sam Fox, Rock LaGrosse, Julie Lou Martinic, Max Shepler, and Terry Endies.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing none, move on to item D, approval of minutes, February 28th, 2023. Yeah. Motion by Alderman Tompkins, second by Alderman O'Reilly. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Motion passes. Staff updates, city administrators update.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I get into the items that I would cover for myself, I'd like to ask Tom Turchi, our new Director of Public Works, to step up and address an issue that I think is going to be pretty exciting to hear regarding the ATV, UTV signage.
Over the past month or so, I was able to obtain enough grant dollars to fully fund the signage for the ATV, UTV ordinance that we will be implementing here in April. So I want to say thank you to the Ready Grant from Wood County, Visit Marshfield, and PowerPack, who all donated to make this, fund this project. Thanks.
And Tom, thank you for all your hard work on this project.
Yeah, it's a great outcome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I know there's members of the council who are appreciative as well. We're hoping to see this come to pass, and you did a great job. Just briefly giving an update from my perspective, I want to give you an update on the referendum town halls. We had one last night at the 2nd Street Community Center that went well. We have 2 more coming up, one tomorrow night, the 15th of March at 6:30 p.m. at Hotel Marshfield. And then the 3rd and final one will be at UWSP Marshfield campus on Thursday, March 23rd, also at 6:30 p.m. So encourage anybody who's not been able to attend to do so. We also have at various locations, City Hall, Library, Police Station, Fire Station, we have FAQ and fact sheets for you to review if you'd like to pick those up and glance over those as well. I did put on the council's desk tonight an updated policy, the Technology Use and Access Policy 8.010. That has been updated since the most recent conversation we had regarding cell phone use. Council made a couple of changes. Would ask that you sign the page that's the one single page and get it back to me if you would, acknowledging acceptance of the policy. Been talking a little bit with the mayor about the idea of getting legislators to come to our council meetings and be able to address the issues that are going down in Madison, have some Q&A time with them. We're thankful that we had the chance to meet with Donna Rosar, I think some of us recently, and appreciate her listening session. But we'd like to get at least periodically members of the legislature to come here and let us know what they're working on, and we can tell them what we'd like to see them work on as well. And then finally, I want to note that Dan Kinect, who has done a wonderful job over the past 25 years, he is leaving us. There's a retirement party for him on Thursday in this room from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. We'd like to see as many of you come out as you possibly can to wish him well, thank him for his service. I can't say enough about the work Dan has done during the last 25 years. I've been here for half that time, and I've just seen a person who's consistent and thoughtful and hardworking and just does his job every single day in exemplary ways. So we want to commend him. So again, if you have a chance to stop by late Thursday morning from 10 a.m. through 1 p.m., please do so here in this room. That's what I have for an update tonight.
Thank you, Steve. And I will make my mayor's comments. We have 3 folks who have employee recognition. Dan Rogers from the cemetery has been there 20 years. Congratulations, Dan. Matt Shirkey, Street Department, 20 years. Thank you, Matt. And Nicholas Landwehr from the library, 5 years. Thank you, Nicholas. Congratulations, gentlemen. And thank you for your service to the city of Marshfield. Common Council, any comments? Seeing none, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Seeing none, consent agenda, meeting minutes and reports. Motion by Alderman Handler, second by Alderman Spiros. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. J, we will not have to do because there's no action to remove. Item K, presentation review 2018 compensation plan. Discuss possible compensation market update. Introduced by Sarah Dreschel, Human Resources Director, presented by Malaya Mas McGrath.
Thank you. So wanted to introduce Milena. She is a senior consultant with McGrath, Human Resources Group. We previously had a compensation study done in the 2017-2018 years. And we definitely work with Milena in between that time to now on an individual basis for job descriptions, other comp questions, things like that. So we did want to invite her, as we've been on various committees talking about compensation and things like that, to have her come and kind of give us an update, a state of things. So welcome, Milena.
Good evening. Okay, that's a little long. All right, my name is Milena Halverson-Mays, and as Sarah introduced me, I am a senior consultant with McGrath Human Resources Group. We are the consulting firm that has been working with the city on your compensation at least since I've been with the organization. And if you'll bear with me here this evening, I'm going to just give you a little bit of a brief introduction about our firm. We're going to go back into history. We're going to talk about what happened in 2017, 2018, and then we're going to jump ahead and we're going to talk about some of the trends that we're seeing here today in terms of recruitment and retention and how your compensation impacts that for the city, and some takeaways on what the city is going to be able to be thinking about in terms of an upcoming project, or at least some direction to the city administration. So bear with me here. Let's hope that this works. Okay. Is there a particular one you want me to hit? Sorry about this. There we go. All right. Thank you. All right. User error. There we go. All right. So McGrath Human Resources Group actually started out as McGrath Consulting, and we've been in business since the year 2000. And in 2012, we became McGrath Human Resources Group just because there's two different sides of the firm. We have the human resources aspect, which is where I am. And then we also have a public safety division where we do police, fire, and EMS organizational type operational studies. We also do executive recruitments. You may be familiar with our firm because we helped the city of Marshfield hire your last police chief. I have been with McGrath now since for about the past 8 years. And my background is in human resources, both in the private sector as well as the public sector. I spent about 20 years in the chair, 15 at a county level. And if you see on the screen, you'll see that our corporate office recently relocated to Tennessee. We actually started out in the state of Illinois, but I live in Chippewa Falls. I'm about 90 minutes just west of here. And so I consider this to be home, right? Wisconsin is absolutely home, and I participate in most of the Wisconsin projects. I have listed on the screen for you the Wisconsin projects that McGrath has worked on. And so even though we are a national firm, we are very, very well embedded into the state of Wisconsin, its cities and counties in terms of compensation. So a little bit more just in terms of, because this is going to become a little bit more important as we start talking about what it is that I am going to be recommending to the organization. When we approach compensation studies, we like to take what we call an integrated approach. And it's not normally always just about wages, but there's a lot that comes with it. It could be what's happening with your metrics, with your recruitment and your turnover. It can be with succession planning. It also can involve your benefits. And at this point, benefits is certainly a big key item. And so we don't necessarily just look at the wages, but we look at what it is that the organization needs us to take a look at. We did that in 2017 for you. We focused primarily on the wages. But what we do then is we create a program, or we create a system for you that we feel is going to be fiscally responsible and sustainable for the organization. It should be competitive so that you can continue to retain your quality personnel and be able to recruit when those turnover events occur, and align it to a compensation philosophy that has been built or developed by the organization. And that is, when I talk about that, I talk about the compensation policy that is developed by the elected officials. And we tailor this to each of our clients. And so the compensation study that we did in 2017 is very independent from the compensation project that we might have done to another neighborhood down the road. We look at what the needs are of your organization when we develop that compensation system. And so we don't provide a canned type product. It very much is individualized to the organization. And that's going to become very apparent when we go down the history lane here of what we did in 2017 and 2018. So in 2017, when we started this project, we collected the market data in 2017. And this is very important because normally what we say is your market data or your market is good for about 5 years. There's going to be fluctuations in certain industries by that within 5 years' time. And so we always recommend that there be a review of your market within that 5-year time. So if there are any blips that occur, then you're capturing them before it becomes problematic to the organization. So knowing that we did that with 2017 data, by the time we were done with this project, I was back in front of the council the first part of 2018, and that was when we provided to you our recommendations. I will say that when we did the 2017 study, we did a very comprehensive look at all of your classifications. Your employees were asked to complete what's called a position questionnaire so that we could very, very specifically analyze the positions and how they all internally align. And I think that that will help you going forward as we look in what is going to be needed for your organization here over the next couple of years. And you've done a very, very good job of making sure that Human Resources touches base with me whenever you have the potential that one of your positions might need to change a pay grade because of certain responsibilities. And so because of that, you've been keeping some of the work up, what's needed in your system, but perhaps you might be falling behind in the market by ranges. So in 2018, we recommended a step model, and step 5 being your market. What we did was we developed your steps at a little bit higher percentage, and as you descend through the range, we gave you lower or lesser step increases. And the reason being is we wanted to get the employees accelerated up to that market rate, and then by the time they got to the market rate, we could kind of slow that down a little bit. We gave you what we thought at the time was very responsible steps. And so you'll find that most of your steps are 2, maybe even down to 1%. And we did that at the time because, as you know, inflation was pretty flat. We were looking at about 2% every year. And so the employees then would receive a step increase along with a cost of living adjustment that really was aligned with what was happening in the external market. And that was what we felt the organization could afford and was sustainable going forward. No one could have predicted back in 2018 everything that we have experienced over the last couple of years. So with those recommendations, there's 2 major takeaways. Well, there were a number of takeaways, but 2 that I really want to point out. And the first one is that the salary schedule should be adjusted annually by a cost of living indicator. It does not have to be the CPI, but it has to be some sort of an economic indicator. So if your salary range is $15 an hour to $20 an hour, next year that might be $15.30 to $20.40. And there were some years, as I understand, that the city was not able to provide that a salary adjustment to those salary ranges. And when that happens, then the rest of your comparables are providing that. What's happening is that your ranges start to fall behind in the market. And I was having communications with your HR director just periodically through the course of the last few years. And she let me know that there have been years that simply the organization just hasn't been able to provide those increases. The other thing, and I have touched on this, is that we do recommend that you do this every 5 years. And because we now know that this data was from 2017, you have passed your 5 years. And at this point, with what's happening in the market, we are finding that more and more of our clients are actually looking at doing this every 3 years, just simply because of what's happening in the market. And if organizations did a comp study prior to 2020, they're getting it back on the books because they want to make sure that they can be aligned to the external market. So why are public employers concerned? There's a couple good white papers that are available to you through what's called NeoGov. NeoGov is a nationwide agency, and they provide applicant tracking for public sector. And so they are involved in many municipalities and counties all throughout the United States, and they track a lot of the applicant tracking. And so they've been keeping these statistics for the last number of years, and we're starting to see that for the last few years, we've been seeing some consistency. This is from 2021. In 2021, we were already starting to talk about that salaries or positions that were paying $40,000 or less, we're starting to see fewer and fewer applications. And, that's certainly problematic because if you don't have the applications, it's going to impact whether or not you can provide, provide your operations and your services. And you'll see then that, there's a decline in just about all salary levels, but most importantly, those lowest paid ones are the ones where we're seeing fewer applications. And there are some ongoing trends that we're starting to see in the public sector now. And it is, I came from the public sector. I spent 15 years there. And I think that sometimes on a market basis, we don't always advertise ourselves very well in the public sector in terms of employment. And strategically, the public sector is going to have to make some changes. So what we're seeing right now is that across the nation, you've got about a third of the workforce that is age eligible to retire. They're ready to go. And we already saw that through COVID, a lot of them have decided to leave and they left a little bit early. And so what's coming in behind them? Who's available to replace or who wants to come in and take these positions? There is less appeal right now with the current or the new workforce coming in to long-term employment. So congratulations to those employees that you identified with tenure here this evening, because those opportunities are getting to be less and less all across the United States. And the trouble with that then is you not only have to develop a compensation system that can support retention, knowing that you can still try to do everything that you can, you may not going to be able to keep them. You need to also make sure that you have a strong compensation system for recruitment as well. There's also some other issues that are happening in public government, and I'm not going to read all of these off. I will have this available to the city so that you can go ahead and you can read this at your own leisure. But there are some real or perceived, decline in public support for government workers, depending upon the type of industry that you're in. And that means that there's people that they would normally apply, but they have decided that they are going to take a different route or a different profession altogether. Salaries and benefits is a concern. There's a growing concern that you can't keep up with the private sector. The cost of benefits is starting to eat up the available dollars. And so organizations are having to make decisions about whether or not we're going to put the dollars towards the benefits or the wages, and so on and so on. And so this list, it keeps compounding and growing. And what we're finding is that public employers are absolutely in a crisis at this point. And I call it a crisis. And actually, interestingly enough, NeoGov is also calling this a quiet crisis. And unless you're in public government, you are not necessarily talking about the fact that there are less applicants to fill your open positions. And so this is the most recent chart that they provided. And I apologize, that's a little bit small unless you can see it on your screen, that they're taking a look at, back in 2019, on average, there was 48 applications for every, this is average all across the United States, for public positions. And right now, you're down to about 14 per position. So your number of open jobs is at about is up by 45%, but you have a significant decline in the number of applications that you're receiving per position. And so what's happening is that you've got a growing gap, right? You have a need, and then you've got those individuals who are qualified and want to fill, and the gap is growing. So that's why the public employers are concerned, and this has been since 2021, and certainly by 2022, we've had a number of organizations that have said, we need to take a look at our compensation and we need to make sure that we are aligned. Now, there's some other additional considerations specific for Marshfield and then this particular area. And these are just some of the trends that I see as a compensation consultant. First and foremost, we can expect that you're going to have some industries that are going to have sharper market changes than others. Your entry-level positions that have a lot of opportunity, they can probably find 5 different jobs. They are the ones where we're seeing that those wages are elevating. So at the entry level, we're also seeing significant leadership wage changes because organizations understand we need to hold on to our leadership. People want to tap into that resource, and they're willing to pay top dollar to get that person, and organizations don't want to let go of those positions, and so those wages are elevating. The city has not been able, we've already talked about this, that your salary ranges we expect are not necessarily aligned to market because you haven't been able to provide consistent adjustments on an annual basis. And what happens then is when we tell the employees step 5 is your expected market, by the time they get to step 5 really isn't their expected market. And that means that they have to go a longer period of time to get to a market competitive wage. And your employees are not necessarily wanting to wait that long. And when they don't want to wait, then they start to go looking elsewhere. And they understand, and this actually goes to the bottom bullet of some of the expectations that applicants and employees have. They understand their value and their worth right now. They know exactly how much they can go earn at another organization, and they might decide to stay here for reasons that are not wage related. But they understand then that they can go to the community next door and they can earn X, Y, Z. And if it's not an unreasonable distance for them, then, all things equal, those individuals are just not going to stay. They're going to go. So continuing on, and I know that this is kind of a long page here. I think that one of the other things that we can expect if we were to take a look at your salary ranges, when we look at salary ranges that have not been updated to the external market prior to COVID, and then they went into the COVID and after effects of that, if they were already behind market, we can expect that it's probably about a 10 to 15% difference in the market. Now, that is an estimation. I have not looked at your numbers very closely, but I want you to understand that we're talking a pretty significant shift. And sometimes organizations will say, well, there's not anything that we can do about it right now. And you might be thinking that we can't do anything about it right now. And I say, well, that's okay. But do you need to know where you are at in the market to know what kind of a difference do we need to make up and develop a plan for that, even if it might take a course of a couple of years? It's better to know and make a plan than it is to not know and say that there may or may not be an issue. All right, some of the other things, the step schedule may not necessarily be relevant for you going forward anymore. It was relevant back in 2017, 2018, times have changed and organizations are deciding at this point that maybe, just maybe, the model that they have needs to change to better reflect what is happening within their respective community and based upon their needs. Through all of these years, you've had union salary adjustments, and you have been likely inconsistent with what the non-union has received. that does cause some compression. I have had communications with the compression committee. They have talked to me about that. And so I would not be surprised to find that you truly do have some compression if we were to run an analysis for you. So those are just some added considerations. So overall, why am I here tonight? To get the to get this topic of discussion onto everyone's plate, and for administration then to start having conversations about where the organization should be looking at this point, simply because you have passed your 5 years, and we recommend that you do a market update just to do a check-in and see where you're at and see what we have to do to get you realigned. The attached, it talks through really what the methodology is for a market update. It takes about 4 months. It normally involves administration with HR and your department directors. And we will collect data from the public. And there was also a question about whether or not we will go into the private sector. And this is something that we absolutely will do. If the organization desires for the comparators to include the private sector, we do that. We do follow, however, the guidance of the organization, because there are some organizations that say it does not matter that we have to compete against the Walmarts or the local manufacturing organizations in my community. We're public sector, and we're only going to compare to public sector. There are other organizations, and I will say that there are a growing number of them that are now indicating you can't ignore the private sector. We have to at least understand where the privates are paying, even though we know that our balance of wage and benefit may not necessarily be the same. And so, yes, we will include private if that is desired by the city. We will also take a look at some positions on a limited basis, but because we did a pretty comprehensive look in 2017, and your HR department has kept us in the know on some of those changes, I think that that's going to be pretty limited. And then normally the recommendations and the costing go back to your administration. We discuss an implementation strategy if it requires us to go into multiple years, and we provide a final report and presentation to the council. Now, with that said, because I know that there have been some topics of conversation at the Common Council level with some committees, there are some opportunities to enhance this and to involve the council if you do so desire to do that, where some of the check-ins can be with the councils to give you a high-level look at what's going on, and also have a conversation of, all right, what is your philosophy? Is the philosophy of the organization changing? Because the recommendations that I make for the organization really do need to align with the expectations of the council in terms of how you want to approach compensation. So the opportunity is there, and I think the opportunity may also have to include, do we keep a step schedule? Do we look at something a little different, like a range model as an example? And also, I think what needs to be on the table, and whether it is or it isn't, is do we have to have more than one salary schedule because you've got public safety with some compression issues because of the collective bargaining process that you don't have with your other employees. I'm not saying that I advocate for that. I think it's a discussion point. So if we do add on any additional enhancements to that, then the organization can expect that that takes about 5 months for those extra conversations to be included. So that's an overall overview. I apologize if I took a little bit more time. I know that you have a heavy agenda, but I do feel that this is a really important topic, simply because in order for the organization to provide the programs, operations, and services that you are providing to your constituents, you need to have quality staff in order to make that work. And if you are challenged at any point with recruitment, retention, succession planning, those metrics are a real good indication of whether or not the organization needs to do a market update. From the conversations that I've had with the directors, when we talk on the position placements with HR, with the compression commission, the conversations that I'm hearing are leading me to feel that the organization is ripe for a market update. I can answer any questions that you have.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you for that presentation. My question is, oh, thank you, Madam. My question is, how much would it cost to do a market update?
Normally, the market updates are, I think what we had quoted the city last year was just under 18,000. I don't anticipate that number budging a whole lot, if at all. If the enhancements are included where we're going to have additional dialogue with elected officials, we want to revisit compensation philosophy, we want to revisit structure, that type of thing, we're going to add to that. I think what we had quoted last year was an additional up to $10,000, and I think it really just depends on, what is the organization looking for out of the project? For example, that excludes benefits. If the organization wants us to look at benefits, we would have to add to that. But base would be about 18.
The other question I have is, at the moment, our financial planner has said that next year we need to cut about $750,000 out of our budget.
Yep.
That's a prediction. And then the year after that is 1.3 million. So when you do a market update and the organization doesn't have money to increase any of the salaries, do you also provide what positions need to be cut so that other salaries would be increased?
So, in my professional opinion, how the organization wants to approach operations, what types of programs and services and the impact of that, it would not be from someone who, I'm not from the organization, so that would not be, that would not be good. That is a conversation that will likely have to happen at the elected official end. What we often do in studies is when we meet with the department directors, we can find what's called soft opportunities, and that's exactly what I call them. An opportunity to take these duties and these duties and, can we combine them somehow or anything like that, but not as a result of a staffing study, because that's not what the intent of that would be.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you. One thing I completely agree with is that the STIP system is really, really out of date. I deal with it here, I deal with the county, and we're constantly chasing compensation plans. Basically, the market studies again and again and again. And they're not getting us anywhere. So we have to do something that's different. So how do you feel that this is going to work differently? I mean, can you just give me an elevator story part of it?
So I think one of the things that we're going to have to talk about is financially, or the difference right now between a step model and we're just going to call it a range model. A range model, for those who may not know, it has a minimum and a maximum. We identify what your market point is, and then we give you a vehicle source where we talk about how do the employees progress through that range, okay? Right now what you have is structured steps. Every employee is put into a box, so to speak. And when we build that model, then we are forcing that salary adjustment each year, regardless if you can afford it or not, unless you're going to say the across the board employees don't get step increases. The range model affords the organization flexibility. Now, that flexibility, though, should not be that we can't give increases, or that increases come as an exception and not the norm, because what we are expecting is that the employees will continue to progress through those ranges, but it just wouldn't be at the same structured percentage of the steps. So the range gives you a little bit more flexibility. The other options that we have are to, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, and there would be part of the discussion, do we need to take a look at narrowing that so that employees might have maybe only a couple of different steps while you get through your financial times, and then we can open that up, a little bit longer when you pass through the next couple of fiscal years.
Do any of our near neighbors have that type of program in place? Anybody?
I'm sorry?
Do any of our neighboring communities have anything like that in place? Or is it something so new they haven't just had experience with it yet.
Right, and I don't know exactly your comparables. That is part of the survey process where we go out and we collect that information and we see who has what at this point. It's not, I know that there are some organizations in the area that had single rate positions, and what their philosophy was we're going to pay you one rate, and that rate is going to be the market rate, but don't plan for any salary adjustments, any kind of performance adjustments, and there's an impact to that if you don't offer performance adjustments, right, for the engagement purposes of the employee. But it's very easy then it's very, very easy to budget. It's simply that it's going to be a higher number. So if, for example, we're going to go back to the $15 an hour to $20 an hour, and we know that the market rate for that position is actually smack dab in the middle at 17. Okay, all of your employees are going to be at 17. We're not going to even mess around with all of those steps. But then because we're going to be very aggressive to get you to that market point, there's no other salary adjustments while we are getting ourselves through the financial crisis. As an example.
Thank you.
Alderman Witzel?
Thank you. I was jotting notes like crazy here, and I have just a whole bunch of stuff.
Boy.
I'm not sure how much I'm going to throw at you right now, but
Okay.
First of all, I do want to mention that I think in the past when we've asked, we've been told that McGrath only compares public sector to public sector, and we don't really get that cross comparison. And I think one of our biggest competitors is the private sector. I mean, we're, as has been mentioned in numerous meetings, we're kind of an island here. We don't have significantly sized other cities within
You're right.
10, 15 miles. You got to go a little bit further. Not that people don't want to. One of the quick questions that I have, is there a trend changing? It used to be you fought hard to get a public sector job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you made a little less money, but man, those benefits were great, especially that retirement. But it seems like in the past maybe 10, 15 years, there's been a shift where the working folks don't really care so much about that retirement. That's too far off. They really want to make that money now. Is that really a trend that's happening?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely it is. And yes. And it, in the private sector, the benefits clearly differ. And most of the time they don't like telling us what it is. I mean, we're lucky if we can try to get wage information, let alone health insurance. But what we typically find is that between your health insurance and your pension, they may not be as strong, but then what you have is higher wages in the private sector. And you do have some individuals who I want the dollar. I don't care about the pension. I don't care about pension today. I might care about it down the road. I also don't necessarily care much about the health insurance, but eventually they end up caring, but initially they don't. We've also seen in the recent year and a half to 2 years in the private sectors that there's been a swift turnaround from wages into the health insurance, where the employer, maybe they're not going to put a 10%, let's just say, inflation, and they know that they have to make up a 10% adjustment. They might not put 10% wage on there. They might say is, we're going to give you your 100% premium health insurance back again. And so they're giving them the benefit, not necessarily through the wages, however, so that if they, because wages is base building, your benefit is not necessarily, and then they can be a little bit more flexible with what they're going to do in the future if they need to put it on wages or not. So we're seeing lots of different things going on.
So when you're doing these comparatives, are you doing total package comparison or are you person?
When it comes to the private sector, it's really wages only, because we don't have the level of information on the 401k and the matches. I mean, we ask for it, but very, very seldom are they going to give it to us. Now, there are times when you can ask your Chamber of Commerce, or there might be some other local survey type documents that are available, and where we talk to your commerce department or other organization, maybe your economic development department, to see if they can help ascertain some of that information. But generally speaking, we're lucky to get the wages.
Okay. And then another quick question, I guess a little bit more into the process. As you're looking at all of the different positions we have in the city, and you're looking at how they fit in the pay grades and how they fit on the steps and where the step is, do you look at potentially changing alignment of certain positions to different pay grades based on the market? So, okay, you do.
Absolutely, we have to, because there will be some, like I said earlier, there are some industries that are going to change faster than others. And that means then that sometimes we have to make the decision, are we going to break the internal comparability? And I need to make the decision if I'm going to recommend breaking internal comparability to make sure that you can recruit and retain that position. And so sometimes that's, those are some of those conversations, difficult conversations, because at the end of all of this is the employees' opinions and impressions on it. And if they don't appreciate that the internal comparability has been broken, then certainly you're going to hear about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And to piggyback off what Mr. Wagner was talking about earlier, I'm unaware of steps in the private sector. I'm aware of ranges.
Yeah.
I think the whole step concept is a throwback from when there were unions and everybody progressed through the unions. And I think there's valid argument for ranges where high achievers have an opportunity to prove themselves and grow a little bit faster than people who are satisfied with the status quo. The other thing I do want to mention, we are going to be talking at letter Q about putting 3 council members onto an interview panel regarding employment concerns. It would make sense that based on what we find from that would piggyback into something that your organization might be looking at doing. So
Certainly.
I don't know that we want to jump on it immediately, but
Sure.
I definitely think it needs to be in the talk as we wrap up those discussions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Administrator Barg?
Thank you. Melena, we've been talking here for a few years, going back to when the previous HR director was here as well, about wanting to be an employer of choice. And like you said, a lot of things have changed in the last 5 years. COVID's been part of it, but other things have changed as well, including what younger workforce is looking for. How do you get a sense of, maybe this is a broad question, but wages in comparison to people looking for certain benefits or family-friendly policies or the ability to work from home? It seems like as time passes, there's a different value system out there. How do we try to get our arms around that at some point and really be able to tailor ourselves to what seems to be the most important for people who are coming up the ranks?
There is a clear difference in the workforce, and it started with COVID, although it started before COVID, and it's because you've got this generation that has started to retire out, and then the new individuals coming in, they look at work a little bit differently. You have, we live to work versus we work to live, and that's absolutely very, very real. And so now what we are finding is employees understand their value, their financial value, and they want that no matter what, they want that. But in addition to that, we call it total rewards. They are looking for that flexible work schedule or the ability to work partial from home or maybe everything from home. And your organization has established the altered work hours where you're closed on Friday afternoons and you're offering your employees that flexibility. And that has been a major step. That's a major kudos to the city for doing that, because not very many municipalities are willing to go down the road of changing hours, because they're afraid that it's going to have a negative impact. So some of the other things that employees are, they would paid maternity or paternity leave or assistance with childcare, those, pet insurance. I mean, we're hearing all sorts of areas of interest, and it just simply is because what is important to the individuals who are getting ready to retire differs from those individuals who are getting out of college and they're looking for, how am I going to pay back my student loans, but I have a dog and I need dog insurance. I'm being on absolute opposite ends of the spectrum, but a total rewards analysis or a total rewards look, and I would imagine that as you are going down the potential of a much like the council member was talking about in an employee committee where you're going to be kind of probing some of these questions, you're going to be finding out those areas that are going to be important to it, what's important to employees, because you have potentially a dichotomy of individuals who are getting ready to retire versus families, and you have to accommodate both.
Thank you.
No one's figured out the perfect solution yet, I'll tell you that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Melina. Thank you very much for the
Thank you.
presentation. Item L, request to approve budget resolution number 09-2023 traffic grant presented by Jennifer Solinsky, Finance Director. Yeah. Yes.
Good evening. In July of 2021, the city was notified it was selected to receive a signals and standalone, ITS standalone program grant for signal interconnect project for the fiscal year of 2022. We finally received that agreement in 2023, and Common Council voted on the February 14th consent agenda to approve that grant, which was included in your packet. This budget resolution also went before the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee on March 7th and was also approved. So with that, staff is recommending approval of Budget Resolution 09-2023 in the amount of $33,000 to be transferred from the Reserve for Contingency account to the Capital Project account to meet the local share of this grant program's cost requirement.
We have a motion by Alderman Witzel and a second by Alderman Wagner. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Request to approve budget resolution number 11-2023, Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, CORP, presented by Justin Casperson, Parks and Recreation Director.
Good evening and thank you. Our Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, otherwise known as CORP, is a study done by an outside firm to evaluate and analyze our outdoor recreation facilities, both public and private, as well as the school district facilities. We went out for proposals in December. We sent it out to 7 firms, 2 replied, Ayers and Parkitecture. Both firms are qualified to do the work. The city has worked with both firms in the past and is currently working with Parkitecture on the Brain Park project. The Ayers proposal came in at $39,000. The Parkitecture proposal came in at $22,600. Our budget is $15,000, so we're a little short. The Board of Public Works approved Parkitecture's proposal and sent forth a positive recommendation to the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, which met last week, who also approved a budget resolution for $7,600 to take those monies from the 202 fund. In our process, this will be the 3rd step in this approval for the proposal from Parkitecture. So tonight I'm looking for approval of budget resolution 11-203, increasing park and recreation funds, which is the 420 funds from the 202 fund.
We have a motion by Alderman Tompkins, second by Alderman Varsho. Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple questions. I noticed in there you had mentioned the schools are included in this. Are they paying any portion of this?
No, so what it does is evaluates outdoor recreation, private companies. Let's say you have a large dirt bike track outfit in town. They're not going to recommend to build a large dirt bike outfit. Private pools could be, we could be live a lot of private pools in town. They're going to say, well, don't build a public pool, stuff like that. So they evaluate all recreation opportunities. Let's say there's a private pickleball company. So no, let's say don't build pickleball courts because there's not a need. There's a private company supplying that need. So they'll look at the school districts and say, well, you don't need to build a large football facility because there is one. There's not a need for that. So that's what they look at. So they don't cover the cost. It's just for us. The main purpose for this is to evaluate and analyze us going forward, but also makes us eligible for DNR stewardship grants. So that's the main goal, is I want to start pursuing some grant opportunities because funding is not easy.
Yeah, thank you. I have another follow-up with that, if I could, please. To be completely honest, I guess the question is, does this have to be done now? Given the situation that we're all going to be doing a lot of upgrades to Bram Park, how much funding do we have to do major upgrades right now? Would it be money better spent to possibly hold off a year, 2 years to have this study done? Or what's your opinion on that?
That's a good question. It expired in 2018, so it has been a while since it's been updated, and it'll at least give us an idea of our roadmap moving forward. It's still up to this body to decide what projects of value we can afford or not to do. Just because we do this now does not mean we have to move forward with these projects, but it does give us one more opportunity to pursue grants if it's worth that. And it's still up to this group, but at least it gives us an idea that if I think this playground's really falling apart and needs to be replaced, at least the plan will back that up, saying, okay, someone else agreed with that opinion.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you, Mayor. The Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, or CORP, as it gets called in the planning circles, I think it's essential for us to be able to prioritize that stuff that is needed, the opportunities, if you will, so that we can spend our money more wisely. And I'm for this. This is a relatively cheap grant. I mean, or cheap project. I'm not really upset about the price of it at all. I think this will be a guide. The thing about it is, there's an old saying in the planning circles that every plan was written by 20 and read by 3. The truth of the matter is, we have to, if we get this thing done, we'd better adhere to it. We had better pay attention to it and pay attention to the priorities, because money is going to become precious over the course of the 5 years that this plan will be in effect. So that's the thing. Let's use it as our guide and be careful about it.
Yes, Justin.
Thank you. We've been preparing for this plan for the last 2 years in our Park Rec Forestry Committee. So they did audits of our parks this past summer. Natasha had the pleasure of visiting all our parks and evaluate them. And we reviewed all of our policies as a department the previous 2 years. So we've been preparing for our comprehensive outdoor recreation plan to happen in the near future.
Thank you. Alderman Witzel?
Thank you. And if we were to postpone this, are there grants that we would not be able to apply for?
Most DNR grants require some sort of comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, but not all grants.
But there's a significant reason to do this now.
There's significant monies there. Most I'll call private grants are 25,000. These are more like 250,000.
Okay, and where is this money coming from?
Room tax fund.
Thank you.
202 fund.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item N, first reading of ordinance number 1491, amending the format of council meeting agendas, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Back on February 14th, it was suggested that there be an item added to council agendas called City Administrator's Update. You may note that there's been one for a while called Staff Update, but that's typically one where I invite, as I did tonight with Tom Turchi and sometimes other department and division heads, to come to the podium and give some reports on what's going on in their world and what's coming around the bend. This would be specifically for me to give updates on some of the ongoing activities, projects, and so forth happening here at City Hall. It was identified, though, at that time or shortly thereafter, that this would actually require an ordinance amendment. We have codified our format for ordinance or for meeting agendas, so we have to actually pass an ordinance amendment to modify it. So at the meeting on February 28th, we talked about this a little bit. There seemed to be council support for that. 2 other ideas came up. I brought one of them up, and that was to move the items for future agendas from after closed session to before closed session. The idea being that people are in the audience, they can hear what's going to be coming up in upcoming meetings before they're removed from the council chambers for closed session. And the same with people at home. When the cameras are turned off, they can hear what some of the ideas are for upcoming discussions prior to that. Council seemed to agree with that. The other one that came up that Councilmember Witzel brought up, and that is including an item similar to what we have on some of our other committees and boards to identify possible conflicts of interest and to put that right up front as well. So the ordinance that you have in front of you, ordinance number 1491, incorporates all 3 of these changes, is presented for a first reading tonight, so no action is requested. It would be set for action on March 28th, but we would take any comments or questions at this time.
Comments or questions? Thank you. Move on to item O, request to approve resolution number 2023-14, authorization to apply for grant funds from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, WEDC, Community Development Investment Program, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. You may recall back a couple months ago, there was a presentation here at the council meeting by Dave Krause on behalf of a proposal by MRDG LLC, a lot of letters there, to put a high-end restaurant at 210 South Central Avenue, which is the former High Street Salon building. The council did ultimately end up considering the possibility of creating a TIF district. However, that did not move forward. Since that time, in an attempt to fill the gap, the funding gap between what they'd raised privately and what they need to complete that project, the developers went to the WEDC, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, looking for a grant. The program is called the Community Development Investment Grant. You may recall that a CDI grant was obtained by the city a few years ago for Wenzel Family Plaza. And they like to give monies to eligible downtown projects. So that is in the process right now. I've been working with Dave on the application materials. The city of Marshfield has no financial responsibility for this. We're effectively a conduit. And what we're really saying as part of this process is that we believe that this restaurant would be good for the community. It would have benefits as called out in some of the plans that we have adopted in the past. But again, there's no cost to the city, just assisting with some paperwork. So the next two items, this one and the following one, tied to that, what would be needed by the city in order to move this forward would be the adoption of a resolution, and that's what this item is about, 2023-14. And the next one ties to it. I'll describe that in a little bit more detail in a minute after this one is considered. So at this point, staff would recommend approval of resolution 2023-14.
We have a motion by Alderman O'Reilly, second by Alderman Giles. Comments from Alderman Wagner.
Thank you. One of the objections that we had, that many of us had when this first came to us with the MRDG, which I think stands for Marshfield Restaurant Development Group. I think that's what it is. Basically, they were asking us to basically assume a risk position and be essentially first dollar in. Now that it's not using the city of Marshfield money, which we don't have to begin with, I think I will support this and wish them the best of luck.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you. I'll expand on Alderman Wagner. I do agree with you. I think this is a common sense approach to moving forward with this. I do have a couple questions, and one was, I guess, what is the city's involvement? How much time, what effort did we put into this? If you could maybe expand on that.
That's a great question. Initially, it was represented to me by the representative from WEDC that there might be a fair amount of staff time required for paperwork and other assistance. When it came right down to it, it really wasn't that much. The only other thing, once we get through the application process, is that there will be an annual update where the city will have to document a few things as part of the process, do a little bit of paperwork, and the developer will as well. So I don't have an idea of how many hours. It was once suggested to me it might be a lot of hours. Now it's come down quite a bit in terms of what we anticipate having to do. At one point, I thought maybe we would have to look at maybe some outside assistance, which we would want them to pay for. We would want the developer to pay for our time to do the required paperwork. What I've done to date, quite frankly, has been fairly minimal, and it doesn't sound like it's going to be too onerous after that.
Thank you. That makes sense. If I could just expand on that just a moment. I think we can't forget that the city is going to get some benefit out of this. There's going to be property tax increase. And will this impact our tax levy amount at all with the net new construction? Or will that not come into play at all with that being a private entity?
No, another good question. It's expected to increase the value of that property by a substantial amount, maybe, as much as $500,000 from what it's valued at today to what it'll be valued at as a completed project. And I believe that will add to the overall city value. I'm not always sure how net new construction is computed, but it'll certainly add to the assessed value of city of Marshfield property, which will be really good for us in a lot of ways.
Alderman Witzel.
Thank you. I guess I'm not really familiar with this WEDC. And I'm kind of confused as to why we're having to pass a resolution for an organization to go after a grant. If somebody can explain that to me.
Yeah, again, Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation is the arm that Wisconsin created a number of years ago to really be able to champion economic development in more of a, sort of a private way of sorts, I guess. I mean, they're not a private organization per se, but they are able to work on providing grants and loans and assisting business development across the state. The purpose of the resolution, quite frankly, and is intended to show community support. The private entity, a developer, cannot apply for this grant on their own. A municipality is the only one who can apply for this grant. And that's the intention, is showing that what is being requested by the developer is being accepted by the municipality as, yes, we see this as beneficial. We see this as a potential need of the community, something that's going to enhance our downtown. We sign on to the idea. Again, merely a conduit, ultimately in the same type of way that we are on the taxi grant. But this is just showing support for the project, really, is all that the resolution is designed to indicate.
Okay, I have a few follow-ups, if I may. We heard comment made today in open comment time. We have not really heard from a lot of entities other than an individual who's representing some sort of a anonymous group of people who want to build a restaurant. We haven't really heard from Main Street. We haven't really heard from other people that would maybe show support. So I'm a little bit wondering if there is a lot of community support for this, or if it's just a small group of individuals. Also, in doing a little checking into MRDG LLC, there seems to be there's a lack of transparency. Looking at the Wisconsin registration of corporations, I see that the MRDG LLC, as has been presented to us, which I assume is this organization, actually has a registered agent of CT Corporation Systems out of Madison. And when I look up CT Corporation Systems out of Madison, I see that that's got a registered agent that actually began in 1936, called the National Registered Agents Incorporated out of Madison, and they have a principal office out of New York City. And then when I look up that National Registered Agents, it sends me back to the CT Corporation, kind of going in a circle. So it seems like there's a little bit of masking, a little lack of transparency as to what this group really is. And so I'm a little bit reluctant to say, hey, yeah, let's just jump on and sign away, when we don't really know, A, if the community as a whole supports this, B, if the downtown, where this is going to be allegedly a major anchor for a Second Street and downtown development, and who these people really are. So I have some reluctance because of those items. Thanks.
Can I try to respond? Yeah, good questions. I think as far as the support for the project, it has been shown, as I think the developer said when they were in front of us a couple months ago, to be part of some of our plans. It's in the referenced in the Second Street redevelopment plan that we're looking at. It's also referenced in previous plans. In fact, ever since Thomas House has gone out, there's been comments being made in different documents about the desire to have a high-end restaurant in downtown Marshfield. As far as the whole thing the line you traced with the LLC and going beyond there, truthfully, I haven't looked into that, so some of what you're telling me right now is new information to me. And that's based upon the level of scrutiny. When we were looking at potentially giving financial assistance or creating a TIF district, that requires a lot of scrutiny on our part, because who are we dealing with? What do we hang our hat on in terms of assurances? Given what we're signing on to here, basically consenting to the fact that this is a benefit to our community, we'd like to support seeing it happen, but we're not financially on the hook. I have not spent that level of time looking at the structure of the organization.
Alderman Wagner. Sorry, Hap. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we talked about this at one point too. First of all, the makeup of the LLC, that's one thing, but the CT Corporation is a professional organization, is a registered agent. So there are a number of, I've served many corporations over the years, as plaintiff's counsel, because CT Corporation out of Madison essentially acts as a professional registered agent for a lot of corporations. So what it is, it's sort of like a corporation may be organized in another state, but for purposes of serving process on them, they hire CT Corporation to act as a registered agent for them. So that's where that registration comes from. That doesn't address anything in terms of who the actual entities or individuals that may be interested in the underlying LLC. CT Corporation, the idea that they're, as you trace them out, that's the purpose. That corporation is really a professional registered agent corporation. But I don't remember to the extent, but we've had that discussion before. Anytime you're dealing with an LLC, you've got that potential that at any given moment in time, you have different members that may have an interest in it. But that's aside from the registered agent issue.
Alderman Wagner?
Yeah, thank you again. I have to address a few things. Tom, I went down that same rabbit hole following this and came up with the same thing. It originally came with a place in Delaware that was, I think, the original founding of the LLC in Delaware. So it was basically the same thing. It's actually a marvelous trip to take on Google because you find something that only a banker could put together. It's really well done. And it meets the purpose that apparently these investors want to read. That's so much for the transparency though. But the other thing I found out about it was the reason that it's coming to the city is that all the money that the state spends for whatever purpose has to be underlined, have a public purpose in it. So basically you can't say that they can't say that the restaurant itself has a public purpose, but we can if it meets our local needs. So basically that's what happens. It's a public purpose doctrine. Your city have the grant, but you've got to guarantee us that you're sending it on to somebody who is actually going to do something. And as far as we can tell, they are going to actually do so. That's good. The last thing was if you want to read something interesting, read the default and liability sections of the contract. If something goes wrong, nobody's responsible. It's wonderful. You take a read of it. So anyway, I think under these circumstances, I don't have any objection to us using WEDC's money. And as long as it's not ours and as long as we're not going to have to pay somebody back, I'm okay with it.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say that I think this is great that a private group took the effort to do a grant. Grants are hard to do. They found the money that we didn't have to give them or want to give them. And as long as there's no liability to the city, I completely support it. And I also look forward to eating there.
Any other comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Request to approve development and grant funds transfer agreement with MRDG LLC related to the application for funding for the Community Development Investment Program administered by WEDC for a project at 210 South Central Avenue, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, the resolution was really expressing community support for the project. This is a little bit more the guts of it, the heart of what the relationship will be between the parties, and just kind of laying out how the monies would be provided and then delivered, if you will, to the developer. And I think this is really the heart of it too, because going back to the last questions that were just raised by Councilmember Witzel and others, my main concern in this is to make sure, and the city attorney review didn't say anything different, that we are not left holding the bag. I mean, that whatever happens, even if things don't come to fruition the way they're expected to, the city of Marshfield is not responsible for any financial costs or anything like that. So I would wholeheartedly agree with what Councilmember Tompkins said a minute ago. It's great if we can have this for the community And the fact that it can be done with dollars from the state of Wisconsin through WEDC is a good thing. We have no problems with the development agreement. The city attorney added a good piece on the public records preservation, to make sure that we're insured for any open records request. And staff would recommend approval of the proposed development and grants fund transfer agreement.
We have a motion by Alderman Spiro, second by Alderman Handler. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item Q, request to appoint 3 council members to serve on the committee to interview city staff regarding employment concerns, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
We're actually going to get to starting this soon, for those of you who are wondering. But since the last meeting, you know, when we had the suggestion that everybody interested send an email to the HR director, Sarah, that did happen, in fact, but the city attorney weighed in saying that, you know, this is a committee being appointed by the body. We really need to formally appoint the members of that committee, which is why it's on the agenda tonight. We did receive emails before I wrote my memo to you in the agenda packet from council members Wagner, Spiros, and O'Reilly, and subsequent to that, shortly thereafter, from Councilmember Tompkins, who also indicated interest in serving on this committee. So we have 4 people interested. We have 3 slots. The goal for tonight is to walk out of this room having appointed 3 people to work with Sarah and get this project going. So staff's recommendation would be the selection of those 3 individuals and appointment thereof.
Alderman Wagner?
Yeah, I will withdraw. I have enough committee assignments to keep me happy. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Alderman Wagner. Other 3 individuals are still good with your position? Do we need to make a motion?
Definitely want a motion tonight.
Yes, please, somebody make a motion.
Please.
Motion by Alderman Paschal, second by Alderman Tompkins. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
No.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Hallelujah. Absolutely. Item R, appointment of Tom Budke, 406 North Vine Avenue, to the Economic Development Board to complete a vacant term ending April 2024. You have the information in your packet. And this is the first reading, so there'll be no action taken until the second reading, which will be on March 28th. Item S, appointment of Randy Gershman, 311 Lay Avenue, to the Fire and Police Commission to complete a vacant term ending April 2024, presented by me. You have it in your packet. We have a comment from Alderman Paschal.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My comment is that I would have to agree with the information that's been provided this evening by public comment. I would urge the mayor to withdraw this nomination and select another citizen from the city of Marshfield to serve on this committee.
Any other comments? Then there'll be a reading in 2 weeks, which will be March 28th, to set for action. Item T, adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Chapter 19.851G, conferring with legal counsel for the government body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to legalization in which it is or is likely to become involved, claims for unlawful tax. We have a motion by Alderman Paschal, second by Alderman Spiros. We are now in closed session.
Ooh.
Mr. Fire?
Yes.
Motion carries to go into closed session.